Okay, well, thanks, Maddie, for getting everybody together. I think we have a good group and we've got a packed agenda. So I recommend that we go ahead and get started by welcoming everyone to here in the new year. Happy New Year. We're at the end of January, but that feels appropriate to say. We're kicking off the first Environmental Justice Partnership Stakeholder Board meeting for the new year in 2024. So wonderful to see everyone online. We wanted to do this fully virtual to accommodate as many people as possible as we kick off on the topic of CAFOs in the region. And this is part one. We wanted to do a virtual format so that we could reach as many people. And we have wonderful community partners who are going to be our hosts for this part one overview of the community identified environmental health concerns related to CAFOs in the region. We have structured the meeting around the community partners that our hosts, Maria and Michael Payan, have pulled together on this topic for us. The idea is we're here as a part one, and at some point in the spring, when it warms up a little bit, our community hosts would like to invite us to come down in person for a part two of CAFOs, where we can come and make in-person visits. And we're going to look at the logistics to try to arrange a tour so that people can see, experience with their full five senses what you're going to hear about tonight virtually. Okay, so welcome to part one. With that, Maddie, just make sure there's no other administrative items that we're missing before I pass it off to our community hosts for the agenda.
I think we're good to go. I'll be sending the agenda in the chat as well. But yeah, excited for tonight. And I'll hand it off to you, Maria and Michael.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Michael Payan. I am a co-founder of Sussex Health Environmental Network, as well as Sentinels of Eastern Shore Health, doing work in Sussex County throughout Delaware, as well as on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, related to environmental justice, public health. A little background on myself. I grew up, and especially with today's topics, talking about CAFOs, talking about living next to facilities like this. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in a rural part of PA. My parents wanted to get me out of the city, and so I could grow up in a rural environment and around nature. We moved into a very rural area. We had cows in the backyard. Was bordered by a cow pasture. Across the street were some family farmers that had been there for years and years. And they eventually had sold that business they'd sold the farm into agribusiness. And they started building poultry CAFOs there, and they took away the cattle on pasture. And a lot of things in our lives just dramatically changed when we started to live across from a CAFO that was oftentimes mismanaged. It ranged from massive odor issues, and when there would be improperly disposed death and improperly disposed waste. Getting off of the school bus, just some days so intense that you're throwing up before you're able to make it to your front door, like walking from the school bus to your door. Friends aren't allowed to come over because it stinks over at your house. When you want to sell your property, you have issues getting rid of it because there may be, people aren't aware of the odor that's around your house, and they may not want to start their restaurant or whatever business they're looking to start there, which created issues in getting rid of the property. Getting out of the bathtub with hand-sized blisters up and down your body because of potentially chemicals that were used to clean out these facilities after they had massive mortality. So a lot of these horror stories that that folks that live frontline fence line with facilities that are mismanaged are going to end up dealing with. This is not just me. This is folks that are in rural areas across the country, and it's a massive issue that people are dealing with. Here on the shore, as we moved away from Pennsylvania, eventually, when we were able to get out of that situation that we were in there, of course, we deal with a lot of the same issues here in a lot of our communities. And that's where Sussex Health and Environmental Network and Sentinels of Eastern Shore Health are looking to do important work, whether it be with community science, advocating with communities and alongside them to try to get better regulations in place to protect community health. So we're here tonight to talk about a lot of those important topics, and just want to thank everyone for joining us again.
And with that, this is Maria Payan. One of the things that is really a passion of mine, and we find in just about every community, is often facilities are cited, and it's not only, let me say, the concentrated animal feeding operations, but it can be the infrastructure related. Okay, so even if we're talking about, say, huge composting operations, let's talk about biogas facilities. So there is a whole network of structure, wastewater ponds, spray fields. So the industry involves a lot of exposure by different means from it. And most of it deals with the fact that it's very concentrated. You have all this waste in one small area to make it what the industry calls efficient. But that comes at a price. And the fact of the matter is, many of the communities that deal with this are the communities that have very little political power, Black, brown communities, a lot of poor white communities, people on fixed incomes. And this is where my passion lies. And with that, I want to introduce you to our first guest is someone who has really earned just my total respect. I'm very excited. We now have within our state environmental agency, Dr. Katera Moore, who is now working in the Environmental Justice Office. And she's trying to bring meaningful involvement where the communities actually have a voice in the issues that impact them. And it started off a little rocky because of some issues that we were already in the middle when Dr. Moore came on. But I'll tell you what, she has absolutely won my respect. This is a woman that really understands environmental justice, and I'm thrilled to have her join us tonight.
Thanks, Maria. I enjoy what you're doing, all the passion that you and Michael bring for the people down there in Sussex County. And so, the thing is that, especially as related to CAFOs, is that, and I hate to be the person that says this kind of stuff, that's ag. And I'm still trying to learn where DNREC can, what's our role? What can we do? And so I've been having a lot of conversations with ag, largely because of you, Maria. And so, I've had a lot of conversations with them. I think we're making progress. So we'll see what comes out of them. But, I've been talking about some of the things that you've shared with me, and I've been trying to kind of get them to kind of see a different perspective, because I think that what actually happens is sometimes, it's, when you don't kind of consider the impact sometimes, right? Sometimes you might not be considering the impact. You might not realize that there is an impact, particularly if you don't live there. So some things that we're doing at DNREC, which is the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, which I'm trying to do, is get to the point of meaningful engagement, right? We're not there, obviously. Right now, we're trying to get outreach together, right? So right now, we're at 101, remedial, trying to get out, get the outreach together. And so some things that we've done is, we've kind of revamped our webpage, right? And I know everybody's not going to the website or whatever, but we've tried to put a lot of information. And so anytime I talk to someone and they're like, oh, I didn't know that, I'm like, okay, what can we do to make some things different, right? So, we have a website, a suite of environmental justice pages that kind of has, I'll put it in the chat, that has resources and our boards, because that's the thing about DNREC too. For me, it's, we do end up with, we have permits and all that kind of stuff, but then there's all kinds of ways to engage with our department and have a real voice, right? We have a lot of boards, we have all these different things. So, right, it's a matter of kind of letting people know like how to get engaged with us. The other thing that I kind of have now, maybe it's probably been a few months, is a page called Be the First to Know, right? So this is the page where, you know, it's so many different listservs and announcements and all this stuff, but now we have it all on one page. You can sign up for stuff and you can kind of see what's happening. So we have that, right? We've tried to streamline so that people understand how these the permitting process works. You know, we started we had our first, I think, really good community information session. So we're really trying to do those, right? Because you guys already know that, you know, if you have a hearing, then you come to the hearing, you say what you got to say, we do a technical response memo, right? What we really want to be able to do is let people be able to ask questions at a facility and have them answer them. So I'm really trying to get people to kind of think about this community information session. And so we try to, we've had one successful one with the air quality issue in Newcastle County, but the idea is that we bring the community in the facility to the table, and this can perhaps, you know, open up the door for community advisory boards or things of the sort, so that there's because they're the neighbor, right? And so that they can answer the questions that people have, because people have real questions. And sometimes, you know, it might be a misunderstanding. Sometimes it might be something for a facility to think about and say, wait a minute, you know, maybe we need to consider that. So like, for me, these conversations help us make better decisions, right? We've created, I'm trying to do, and I know people get tired of being surveyed or whatever, but, you know, we have, you know, I'm trying to be out at events, right? So, and that's one thing I'm trying to understand, like, where are the events so we can talk to people, find out what their concerns are. I've created, I keep saying I've conceptualized a brochure that, you know, our graphics people design, but that's something that's kind of like an at a glance that tells you all these different resources, right? And we have resources in the rural areas that a lot of people just didn't know that we had, right? And so that's another thing that we've had, you know, and it's trying to get feedback from people. The other two main things are our environmental justice area viewer, which is what we're asking staff to use, and we're asking other state agencies to use to kind of figure out if there's going to be an action in a particular area. Number one, is it an equity focused area, which is an analysis done by, you know, with DelDOT that kind of looks at race and class. And if it's a limited English neighborhood, right? And so we kind of actually made our own layer to kind of make sure that we were capturing mobile home, manufactured home communities, public housing, all these different things, so that we can get the translation out to where it needs to be, right? And so how it's supposed to work is like, if something's going on, you type in the address, bam, it's going to either come up equity focused area, limited English neighborhood, and then that's going to trigger something that you need to do, right? And so it's not perfect, you know, we some of our divisions are doing it better than others, but that's what we're trying to do. The other things that we're doing, again, because what's happening, and I'm doing a lot of this like as best practices and from feedback that I've gotten. So we know that our public notices go in the newspaper. Nobody's reading the newspaper, right? And so it's like, how can we get that information out in another way? What my dream is I'm going to have a bulletin board network, right? And so this is why we have the community assets campaign. I'll put that link in the chat too, where we kind of want people to identify places that are in communities where people get their information, and we can hang up a notice, right? So yes, we have to meet the legal requirement to put it in the paper, but we also can like shoot it off to, you know, Reverend such and such, because he's going to hang it up in their church, or over to this place, because then everybody knows, right? So there's not this, no one knew because it ran in the news journal for a day, right? And so that's what we're working on. What we're about to launch, I think Public Affairs told me they're going to do this. I think tomorrow might be the first one, where I've asked them to summarize the public notices that have been, summarize the public notices that have happened over the course of a week. So the social media post is going to be on Twitter, on X, and Facebook. It'll say, we did public notices in these towns, and then give you links to whatever, just so people can know. And then hopefully people will be able to reshare those posts, so that I'm just trying to figure out ways to get people information, right? There's a digital newsletter that's coming out. What we also created was a public notice page, one that's in Haitian Creole, one that's in Spanish, so that all those notices that are appropriate are translated into those languages and people can go there. And again, I know not everybody is going to be online, but like this, this is what I'm thinking right now and what I'm hoping to, if somebody says, well, actually that idea sucks, do this instead, I'll be more than happy to entertain that. If you think it's a great idea, let me know that too. The other thing that we have on our website thing is a share your thoughts, right? And that is kind of, and no one has really used that. I don't know, it's because people don't know about it, but it's to kind of let us know what you think we should be paying attention to, right? What should we be paying attention to in terms of environmental justice issues? What should we, maybe you poked around in our map and you're like, oh, I got some questions, or, I mean, maybe it's something you think we're doing something spectacular or whatever, but it's like, those are things that I'm hoping to do. So those are kind of things that we've been doing right now. And like I said, that's why it's like really, we're like at the baseline, right? To try to get the information out in places that I hope that we are able to reach people. And the next step of that is to kind of even be more intentional, right? And so things that I'm looking to be able to engage with is, community events, like it's all kinds of stuff that's happening. And DEMREC actually has a lot of resources, right? They have resources that for greening projects, for water infrastructure, all of this stuff that I think there's just a lot of people they don't know about. They know about us as permits and they know about our parks. I'm really want to do some outreach and get more regular people on our advisory committees, right? Because that's where a lot of decisions are getting made, right? A lot of things are happening. And I've sat in on a couple of them and I'm like, we need some regular folks there, right? So that's going to take me a minute to do, but that's like at the top of my thing, The other two things, another thing that I'm working on is this, we have all these divisions, but kind of make sure our divisions are talking. And then also we're talking to other agencies, right? Because like I've gone to like how I said, like, I don't really know what's going on because I don't know a lot about, I know what I know about CAFOs, but I don't know how it works, the regulations here, right? And so I've been talking to Ag about that. I'm trying to talk to Delaware because I know a lot of people are concerned about truck traffic, right? I've been trying to talk to DHSS because people are concerned about health assessments, right? So I've been trying to do those things, but it's a slow process. I'm used to moving a little bit faster, but the thing about it is that a lot of the people, almost everyone that I've talked to in these agencies have been open to what I've been saying. It's just a matter of trying to figure it out, right? So like, okay, so my thing is like, okay, now who do I need to talk to? How do we trigger these things to kind of make it easier for like when I'm gonna use you as an example, Maria, you're gonna say, oh, we want to such and such a study, and they're gonna say, oh, that we don't do that, or it doesn't meet that threshold. Like, so what I'm trying to do is kind of build up some folks where I can say like, hey, can you go ahead and do this, right? So like who can I call that's the real decision maker around those things? So that's what I'm trying to do. And that stuff takes time. The other things, and I know I don't have that much time, is that I'm working on trying to do a public involvement plan and a language access plan. So obviously there'll be some more public processes around it. I'm just trying to gather some information. And my big dream is to do some more youth engagement and some citizen science, right? And so like ultimately, because that's what I know how to do. I know how to do youth engagement. And so I'm trying to figure out a way or partnerships. And I don't have the capacity right now. So that's why it's kind of a pipe dream at this moment, but maybe in like 6 months, I'll be in a little bit better shape. But that's what I'm hoping to do. So that's all of my stuff in a nutshell. Like what we're trying to do is make sure that people at minimum know what we're doing and know how to access our information and can give us input and feedback, kind of there's a two-way, right? So not just this, we're putting stuff out, but like I want people to be able to give me information as well, and then use that information to do something better, right? Because I think that, and I'm a big proponent of citizen science, and I know citizen science really started off with Cornell and birds and all that kind of stuff, but it always is a way, because people have eyes on the ground, like they know what's happening, in the community. And so finding a way to kind of bring us all together, because everybody is working towards the same thing, it's just at a different paths. And so that's my 2 cents. I hope I did what I was supposed to do.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. And Katera, I'll tell you, we're closer to your dream. We have some connectors. I'll talk to you next week, but with the water and the research of the youth, I'm a big believer that everybody working together that's really the way to accomplish things. I just met a wonderful student and that wants to do some work, and I will talk to you about that later. It's on water. Anyway, from here, thank you, Katera, Dr. Moore. I really, really, really appreciate that. I want to introduce you to a woman who is, she's just an angel, this woman. I met Emanie Dorival, who is a nurse practitioner, actually through an issue. And then again, here we're talking about working together. Their community was facing a biogas facility that was coming in. It is a residential ag neighborhood. You're talking about 250,000 tons of waste coming in from multiple states, going through a digester. You're talking about flares, you're talking about up to 73,000 tanker trucks per year, and a digestate at the end of it all that gets land applied onto fields. In Delaware, our water quality is horrendous. 97.5% of our waterways are impaired. 100% of our estuaries are impaired. The highest number of public wells that are non-potable. So we have some real issues here. Emanie is at the heart of the center of a community that's going to be closest to this facility. Emanie is not only a nurse practitioner, her husband is a pastor. They are the central focus point of their community. It is English as a second language through Emanie's efforts and the Title VI. We were actually able to now, you just heard Dr. Moore talk about that the notices are going out in both Haitian Creole now and in Spanish, which had never happened before. So with that, Emanie has a lot of input as a healthcare practitioner into community health as well as worker health. So I'm going to turn it over to Emanie to tell us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my experience and what I live and notice for the past 5 years. I moved from California to this area to accept a position as a bilingual provider. And while working for that organization, I did not like the treatment for the Haitian patients that I had, and that trigger pretty much provoked me to open my own practice. So I've been practicing here in Seaford, Delaware for the past 4 years, and sometimes we hear health disparity, health inequity. I live it on a daily basis. I would say 70 to 80% of my patient populations are pretty much underserved. And the percentage of Black and Brown is about 80%. So, and in that 80% that I'm talking about Haitian, African Americans, the Haitian population is about 50 to 60%. Most of them, they not only have the language barrier as the major hurdle to express their concern in the workplace. Work hazard is huge, This past month has been very difficult for me because there are more coming with the Biden program. They also give them work authorization. So they hiring a lot of them, minimal, very cheap labor in the poultry industry, but they are not being they're not even train them, basically inform them how to protect themselves. Recently, I have patients who lost a hen, was cut off. I had one that fell from 8 feet down on the ground. I had one that was burned, the whole posterior part of the right arm is burned with chemical. And so these are the things that I face. And I can tell you, all of them have allergic rhinitis. It's classic, the way, due to high exposure of chlorine, where they work, they're inhaling it on a daily basis. That's beside the CAFO that that was the first thing that welcomed me in the area when I just moved. It's very obvious when you drive, when you're driving down 13, coming here, that's the first thing that say, hey, you're in Delaware. So these are just to say a few of the health inequity, health disparity that I face on a daily basis. Recently, about 4 or 5 months, Maria, we heard about the biogas company coming near us. It's about 2 miles from the church where my husband is pastoring. And these people, not only they're exposing to high level of chemical at work, and at home, they're gonna have double exposure. They don't have a voice. Pretty much they name the job that where they're working, they need the job to help their families and themselves. So it's almost like impossible where they're going to take off health consequences later on, how their health could be affected due to their work environment. That's not their number one priority. The number one priority is to have a paycheck and be able to support their family. But we know, due to one, they do not speak the language. They don't have the fluency of expressing their issues. So as a provider, when I see them, I'm not only helping them with their health problems, so I also have to reach out. Recently, I reached out to Maria. Do you know any lawyer who will take these cases? So these are the things that I face on a daily basis, and I don't see a solution. And it brings this sense of powerlessness. I'm here, I'm doing my best, but at the same time, it's not enough. It's not enough to help them. And for the whole entire Eastern Shore, it's already an underserved area. For these communities, it's even worse. It's even worse because when you think about it, someone who just came to the country, they work, they don't give them proper training in their language so they understand the work hazard they are going to face and how to protect themselves, and using the machine they're using inappropriately. Like that gentleman who burned his arm, pretty much, he was wearing gloves, but whatever liquid that was on the glove, he raised his hand, it dripped down to his, he burned his arm. These pictures are horrible. I took pictures And again, legal representation is not easy to find. So these are the issues that we are facing in this community, and pretty much I'm not screaming for help. And it's not easy to find help for them. And like one of them, the case with this burn, I contact a few lawyers, but pretty much nobody is really wanna really take the case. And pretty much, and they pressuring him to go back to work. And I have another gentleman who fell down. Pretty much he was getting physical therapy. Now they return him back to me because he is in too much pain for them to continue. So these are the issues that we are facing. How do we improve their work environment? How do we bring fairness, equity to their environment? They're doing a necessary job. We need the labor that they are providing, but at the same time, it could be safer. How can we bring that safe work environment for them, where they'll be able to, to thrive, do their job, take care of their family in a safe environment? Pretty much that's the nutshell about what I do and the community I represent.
Emanie, thank you so much. And again, what did we talk about? Working together. These are not unsolvable problems, right? Industry says they want to be a good neighbor. Why don't we have people that speak the language to be there, to provide the proper training? Like, this doesn't have to happen. So this is fixable. That's why it's so important that we all come out and talk about things that are behind a curtain all the time. So from there, thank you, Emanie, appreciate it. From there, I want to tell a story, and Michael told you how kind of we got into this. It's not like you grow up wanting to be an activist, because you don't. It's very hard. You're fighting very a lot of power, a lot of money, and it's like David and Goliath every single day. But I meet such incredible people, and Gabby Ross is one of those folks. I met her, oh gosh, I want to say probably, I was looking through articles today, it must have been about 2000, maybe 15, 16, maybe 16-ish, somewhere around there. Gabby is a self-taught community activist. Her voice was activated when a 13 poultry house CAFO was cited to be built less than half a mile from her home on the Eastern Shore. She founded a grassroots citizen activist group called Concerned Citizens Against Industrial CAFOs in 2015, which petitioned the awareness of social injustices on the shore related to the agricultural expansion affecting clean water and air. She has extensive experience in advocacy and coalition building, as well as participating in the Mid-Atlantic Justice Coalition and the Enforcement Engagement and Empowerment Collaboration on the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland. And again, Gabby has taken a lot of losses for doing this work, which you'll probably go into. But Gabby, on to you.
Thanks, Maria. I really appreciate it. And my apologies for being late. It's been a rough day. And thanks, Matt, for sharing my slides. So Maria introduced me. I used to live in Wycomico County on the Eastern Shore, and pretty much just kind of started out in this activism world because there was slated to be built a 13 poultry house CAFO, which was the biggest precedence at the time a few years ago. And basically, I didn't know anything. There wasn't anybody to help me. I didn't know what to do. So I wrote about 200, or printed out about 200 letters, and pretty much knocked on a bunch of doors within the Northwest Road community in Salisbury. And I've found that at the time, MDE was doing a terrible job of notifying people about upcoming projects. The only rule at the time was that they had to notify adjacent, landowners. And at the time, we're living in a rural area. There wasn't a whole lot of people except for a farmer in one household that were notified about this project. And this was a huge deal. And to make a long story, yeah, thank you, Maryland Department of the Environment. And 13 poultry house CAFOs, 600 by 60 feet. That was, I think, it was slated, I think it was almost 3 million birds going in there. And so to make a long story short, because this fight went on for years, we started organizing as a community. We started meeting at libraries, churches. I mean, anywhere where we could get a free meeting room, you name it, we were there. And then that's how I met Maria and Michael. And they, really helped us kind of figure out, what to expect. What were we going to actually see this thing getting built at this massive capacity? That photo on the top is literally one of the Wycomico County Council meetings that we literally packed that room. There were people sitting in the hallway. It went on for hours waiting to speak. And, at the time, nobody was going to county council meetings. I think we, scared the county council. They're like, what the heck are all these people here for? And we really, we have hundreds of members within Concerned Citizens Against Industrial CAFOs. And as we started getting organized, we said, okay, let's name this group. There were people coming from multiple counties, multiple states. Currently, we have people pretty much from the entire United States in our group that are constantly asking questions, looking for information. But the primary purpose of Concerned Citizens Against Industrial CAFOs was to fight projects on the shore and as well as Delaware and Virginia. So we successfully fought off that 13 poultry house CAFO on Northwest Road in Salisbury. We organized to reduce housing numbers for the other projects that were slated, like Rockawalken and the one off of 13 and Snow Hill Road. We were a very powerful force at this time. I think there were articles in the news that were like, oh, when the Eastern Shore communities turned their back on big chicken, right? So this was huge. To have unprecedented numbers of housings in an industrial form of agriculture has never really been done. It wasn't your family farm anymore. These were people that were coming from overseas that were literally signing signing documents and putting in these poultry contracts. And they were people that didn't even live anywhere close to where they were proposing some of these farms. So, and at the time we were slated, we were accused of we hated family farms and we hated chicken and we were going to ruin the economic development. That wasn't what it was. What it was you have these unprecedented number of houses. You have these unprecedented amount of chickens, unprecedented amount of, environmental concerns, traffic concerns, air quality concerns, health concerns, and something that wasn't really talked about on the shore, which was environmental justice concerns. Because where were these things getting built? They were getting built in low income, people of color neighborhoods that didn't have a voice, that didn't know anything about this, that didn't have time to sit there and organize and have meetings and fight MDE and fight all MDA and everything like that. And these fights went on for years. And still to this day, years later, we are still an organized group that is keeping an eye on this, holding polluters accountable, and literally making sure that, the industry needs to clean up its act. The industry needs to put the protections in place to protect public health. And what we've seen is that, over the last couple of years, we've done a lot. we've really have moved mountains as far as permitting goes. Now we have so many different tools. We have the EJ screening tool, which was, produced by Dr. Jacoby Wilson at University of Maryland. Now we have a brand new open MDE portal, which you can see all of the permits for every single type of facility and, new permits, all of these different types of things. None of this existed when we were fighting this. And one of the biggest things that I want to talk about is the Community Healthy Air Act. The Community Healthy Air Act was introduced after years and years worth of industry. It was called DPI back then, Delmarva Poultry Industry. And they were like, oh, well, we just don't have Maryland data. We can't do anything about air quality and health concerns because we just don't know what's going on. So if we don't know what's going on, then therefore we can't do anything about it, right? So our coalition, which was, Concerned Citizens Against Industrial CAFOs, ASTI Coastal Trust, SRAP, which is Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, Moms Across America. We had all these different types of coalition, Food and Water Watch and everything like that. And what was going on was, okay, well, if we don't have Maryland data, we're taking industry-funded studies from University of Georgia. Let's put up a bill to create a study to get Maryland data. So we introduced the Community Healthy Air Act back in 2017, 2018, and 2019. And wouldn't you know, the industry fought us with hard lobbyists, lots of money, and continue to refuse to admit that there was a public health crisis of astronomical health disparities going on the shore, high rates of asthma, COPD, lung cancer, different types of skin disorders. And we wanted to know why. I don't think that's such a hard question to ask, right? We asked for epidemiologists, we asked for this stuff. Matthew, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for 3 years, we fought hard to try to get the Community Healthy Air Act passed. It was not. We fought hard against the lobbyists. Lots of arguments within Annapolis and the legislative state. And then there's some of us there testifying on behalf of the Community Healthy Air Act. So after years worth of fighting, exhausting, painful work, it never got passed. And Keith Campbell Foundation and Delmarva Chicken Association decided that they were going to go ahead and donate money to do a study. And this one-time study that we originally wanted, which would identify air pollutants emitted by large CAFOs, assess any potential public health risks to people that live within close proximity, not just ambient air. We wanted to know what kind of health risks people that lived in close proximity to these large industrial farms were facing. So I want you guys to look at that bottom photo there. So that photo, there's a row of houses right within the middle. Those houses were there first. Those 4 little CAFO barns in the back were there, but then literally within about, I think, a year and a half, all of those barns popped up with no notice to the adjoining neighborhood. Absolutely, no information about how big these things were going to be, what they was going to look like. And then, to take it from the air really tells the story of how these people that live in Princess Anne got totally screwed over on their property values, their health, and literally now giant eyesores that they have to look at with noxious fumes of ammonia and, flies and everything like that. So that's kind of what we were really trying to address. What do these people that live within these massive amounts of chickens and barns and fans and all this kind of stuff, what are they going through? So Keith Campbell Foundation decided that we're going to go ahead and between them, we're going to donate, $500,000 to create an ambient air project, and we're going to work with MDE. I will tell you, my email has been the same for 20 years. Everybody knows that I am the head person of Concerned Citizens Against Industrial CAFOs, and not once was I ever contacted to participate in any kind of air study or to even be a voice within this type of study. Now, granted, I am not a scientist. I was not employed by the state of Maryland, but as a community member that has worked very hard to voice these concerns over the years, who has gotten fired from multiple jobs, who has been harassed both verbally and physically and online, you would think that I would have been approached to participate or at least give my opinion on what this was going to be proposed. So the Lower Eastern Shore Ambient Air Quality Monitoring Project was literally created, and it was released by Keith Campbell Foundation sometime, I think, earlier last year. And the biggest thing that I want people to know is not one community group, no NAACPs, none of the groups that we worked really, really hard on the Community Healthy Air Act were allowed to participate or asked to participate. And Matthew, if you could go to the next slide, please. So I want to just kind of address this because I have asked why community groups were not involved. And the answer I got from Holly Porter of Delmarva Chicken Association was that she considered herself a community member, therefore nothing was awry. And I wanted to show people what diverse partners were listed within the DLLC of being members that fully backed this white paper that, literally gave us the answers that we didn't ask for in the first place. Ambient air. And now I know Kathy Martin is going to go into detail about this, but I will say that over the years of the harassment, the unjust amount of ridicule and hatred and things that I have gotten, the main thing that I wanted to achieve in all of this was to just get data so that we could see if there was a problem for the people who have gotten utterly screwed over by having massive industrial CAFOs put up right next to their homes. And, we have done our own studies. We have found different information. Obviously, air quality studies are very difficult to produce, but I also want to, identify the fact that a lot of these people within these groups are industry. And I mean, the pictures read for itself. You can see everybody that's listed on there, even at the bottom, when the white paper was produced to the public, you could see the main people that were engaged in the process were from Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Purdue, Mount Air, Keith Campbell Foundation, Delmarva Chicken Association, VIMS, VADQ, and Sustainable Chesapeake. And not one community group's listed on this. And to have, a foundation produce a study, a white paper, based off of industry funded money, that is really concerning, especially since it wasn't identifying the original problems that we asked for in the Community Healthy Air Act. So I want to leave by saying that this has definitely not been an easy fight. It has been demoralizing. It has been extremely demeaning, but there is hope, because I think now with all of the outrage that's gone on since, 2015, we have a lot more answers now. We have a lot more protections in place, and we have a lot more accountability as far as what's going on in our Chesapeake Bay, what's going on with, major health concerns as it relates to all industrial types of facilities. And we also have a better understanding of how environmental justice works within the state and how environmental justice needs to be heavily pushed as far as regulations go and government and how government agencies can protect these types of people that for years have endured the worst types of hardships. Because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And I think we can all do a lot better at communicating and working with, but at the same time, I will tell you that a lot of this environmental justice stuff that's going on now has been a lot of fluff. And I personally believe that there is a lot of work to be done when it comes to environmental justice, especially in the state of Maryland. I can't really speak for, and Delaware as well, since I've worked in Delaware as well. But we need to come together, because you cannot say that you have diverse partners and all of the community groups, all of these different environmental organizations that have been working towards this to not be included, to not be asked to participate. That's a huge problem. And it really needs to be addressed. So Maria, I'm gonna turn it back to you. I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat. And thank you.
Thanks, Gabby. Appreciate it. So science is important. Environmental justice is important. There are 17 principles of environmental justice. What does environmental justice call for? That the community speak for themselves. They have a seat at the table. They have meaningful participation. This did not happen. The communities, they did everything they were supposed to do. They went to county government. They went to the legislators. They tried to get information that industry asked for. And then behind the scenes, it got undone and we did not get that information, which is why citizen science is very, very important. We're going to turn it over to Kathy Martin now, who has a master's degree in civil engineering. She's worked on CAFO-related issues for, oh my gosh, the past 25 years in 25 states across the country. I have known Kathy since I was pulling my child out of the bathtub with blisters all over his body. So her experience over the past 2 decades, she's reviewed hundreds of livestock facility permits, laws and regulations, published literature, guidance documents, and she's the foundation of her unique perspective and understanding of livestock and poultry waste management systems and the types and amounts of air pollution that they generate. And we asked Kathy to kind of go through the white paper and give us like some background on what she saw.
Well, thank you, Maria. And of course, you're my dear friend and colleague, and Mr. Michael, thank you. And Matthew's going to help me with my slides, but I just wanted to say one thing. Working with communities across the country in 25 states, I'm talking about being in people's kitchen tables where they make the decisions about the health and welfare of their family and the financial future of their farm or their business or whatever. And that's been an amazing ride for me and throughout my life. And I treasure the relationships I made along the way. I'm going to just say one thing very clearly. It will never be environmental justice until the state agency says no permit. Okay? Otherwise, it's just a conversation and it's begging for you to please not pollute us anymore. True justice is that the decision is made without having a community beg for protection. Okay? Keep that in mind. We're at the beginning of the battle. This battle has been going on way too long. Agencies need to be able to say no. Too much. We're done. Go find another location. Okay? Now, let's get to the little report. You know, I spent 25 years looking at permit applications, waste management systems. I can talk about animal poop till the cows come home. and how much hog manure is generated, how many tons of poultry litter, what are the chemicals in the air pollution. All this stuff it's all important, because the only way a community can challenge a facility is generally through a permitting program of some sort, right? And so that permitting program, each state is different, but usually there's a waste management system. I will tell you something that is common throughout the United States is the big void and silence about air pollution coming from large-scale animal feeding operations. Now, there are some states that issue air permits, California, Arizona, pretty soon Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, that they have issued an air permit for large CAFOs that are actually trigger Title V permitting, which is, regulatory speak for a really bunch of air pollution, all right? But generally, most states shy away from it. Most agriculture departments that regulate CAFOs, they go, oh, we don't do air, we don't do odors, but the pollution is there. And in some cases, the air emissions are a critical part of the waste management plan to reduce the amount of nitrogen in the waste, to reduce the number of acres that are required to dispose of the waste by agronomic rates, which is the crop needs only a certain amount of nitrogen. If you can get rid of half the nitrogen by volatilizing it and blowing it out your barn, then you only need half of the acres, right? We can all follow that logic. When I first started fighting CAFOs in Oklahoma, they had open pits where they put hog manure in. Of course, we have very little rainfall. We have a lot of hot days. So a lot of them were evaporative systems. And I calculated that they were losing up to 85% of their nitrogen as volatilizing as ammonia. And I said, what kind of a waste management system is that? You claim in one hand in the news that, oh, we're bringing this valuable fertilizer into the community. We're going to change the face of farming, but you're blowing it all out the window and into other people's windows in their homes and yards and businesses. You're not conserving the nitrogen, you're volatilizing the nitrogen, okay? When you drive down the road and you see poultry barns up and down the road with big, huge fans on the end of them, you don't see any kind of air collection devices where they're trapping the lost ammonia, which is the nitrogen, so that they can conserve it, so that they can have this valuable fertilizer to present to the community. No, they're blowing it out and keep on going, because they're in the business of raising chickens, not in producing truthful waste management plans. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, next slide. I just got off my soapbox. Now we'll talk about the Delmarva Land and Litter Report. I'm not going to go through the report, but I will tell you a couple of things. They use stationary monitoring to monitor the air. And because it was stationary, they wanted to be able to leave it unattended. So they needed to find a location where they could leave valuable equipment that could be secured and hopefully not destroyed or vandalized. And they say in the report, they had a problem finding satisfactory locations. But again, that is a problem they brought upon themselves by choosing a stationary monitoring system rather than a mobile system. Number two, because of, or on purpose, but maybe because they had limited choices, they put the locations of the stationary monitoring sites at places that were not downwind from the predominant wind directions. Okay, that's a problem because you can only measure what is blown towards a stationary system. If it's blown the opposite direction, you can't say, well, there's no pollution. There's no pollution right there, but that pollution is actually in somebody else's backyard, in somebody else's kitchen. Okay. It doesn't mean it disappeared magically. It's just blowing in a different direction. That's why mobile monitoring is so key. And then the third thing is, of course, the monitors that they chose, and we'll show some pictures here shortly, were too far away from the actual source. So rather than detecting the air pollution that came out of the poultry barns, like Gabby said earlier, they were basically detecting ambient conditions 6 to 10 miles away, and maybe never in the down gradient position of the CAFOs. Okay, so next slide. And if you're saying anything to me in the chat, I probably won't be reading it, so I'll rely on Michael to let me know. So here's the Google Earth image of one of the locations at Princess Anne, which Gabby was talking about, and the yellow push pin, and then I put a gold arrow so you could see that's where the monitor was. I've circled in red where all of the poultry barns were. Okay, now somebody might think if that was all you were looking at is, well, boy, I put it right smack in the middle of everything. I ought to be able to detect pollution from everywhere at some point. But what they don't talk about, they didn't have a windrose. Okay, well, what's a windrose? That's the thing on the right. And what that is that's the accumulation of wind data, speed, and duration that's plotted in this bullseye type drawing called a wind rose, ROSE. The bigger the petals on the rose, the more often the wind comes from that direction. Okay, so when you see those triangles, the base of the triangle is where the air is coming from, and the pointy end of the triangle is where the air is going to. Okay, so they're all pointing into the center, but you can see where if the big arrow at the bottom is coming, the air is blowing from the south directly north. And then the next biggest triangle on that drawing is to its left. So that means it's coming from south southwest and blowing north northeast. Okay. The next two biggest triangles are, let's stop. Let's go look at our map. What CAFOs are to the south of my yellow pushpin? Well, none. I mean, there's some to the south southeast, and there's some way south southwest, but there's literally none south, which is where the wind is coming from most of the time. Right. Now let's go to the next two largest triangles, and those are where the wind is coming from the northwest and going to the southeast. Let's go back to our map. How many CAFOs do we have to the northwest? We got one lonely guy up there. Now, what are the odds that the pollution that came from that facility would be going directly in a diagonal, might just like flow right past that monitoring station, but never intersect that monitoring station? I call that, are you side swiping the pollution plume, or are you directly in the pollution plume? Okay. If you say you're measuring 10 parts per million, but you're at the very edge of the plume, I want everyone to know that the concentration in the dead center of the plume is going to be higher, right? All right. So now, where are the hog barns? Oh, not the hog barns, sorry. It's on my mind. The poultry barns, the vast majority of them are to the southeast. So let's look at our wind rows. And we've just got very little wind ever coming from the southeast to the northwest. So that monitor would not even ever detect the pollution that's coming out of those barns 24/7, because that pollution is traveling to the north, or that pollution is traveling to the southeast, not to the northwest, right? It's not disappeared. It's not non-existent. It's just not going towards the monitor. But if you were driving around southeast of those barns with a mobile monitoring, you would have pretty high percentage of capturing it. And definitely if you drove around on the road, you see where that purple line is. There's a couple of roads just below that purple line, the east-west line. If you drove around there, you would probably catch the pollution from all of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 complexes, right? So it's location, location, location. Let's look at the next slide. and see if that was just a one-off. Okay, thank you. Matthew, if you'll show me then, okay, that is the next slide, thank you. Hi, Dr. Shakobi. And again, I can't read, I'm so blind, I can't read the chat. Now, here, the yellow push pin is in the dead center of the facility, and you can see poultry barns all around this thing. And if that's all you knew, you'd say, oh boy, this is the best spot, because no matter which way the wind blows, I'm gonna catch something. But again, the windrows looks very similar. Now, this one is in if I say the name wrong, Poconoke City, Maryland. If you live there, you would know. You would know that the wind mostly comes from the south, or it mostly comes from the northwest. You would know that, okay? If they had talked to people that live there and say, where do you think is the best place to put a stationary monitoring? The folks would say, well, it stinks at my house, but not at Mary Sue's down the road. So you need to be closer to my house, you know? And whether or not you know scientifically why that happens, it doesn't matter. Just, you know, think about it. Every day we know when we look in the weather or something, the storms are coming from a certain direction. We know if there's a hailstorm, it's going to come from another direction. This is the stuff that's in the back of our minds that helps us plan our day. The windrows illustrates that for us. So once again, the vast majority of the wind, the biggest, longest triangles show that the wind is coming from the south and the southwest, very, very much south, going towards the northeast. So let's look where our push pin is. There are literally no poultry barns south of that push pin, okay? They're all much more east or much more west, okay? Or north. So let's look at the other two, which you know, the about half the size, so half the frequency, the wind is coming from the northwest and going to the southeast. Now we do have some barns there. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. This one actually is measuring, but what are we never measuring? The 3 big barns that are directly east of the stationary monitoring, you're only going to measure them. Look at how tiny the triangle is. Very, very, very rarely. And you're not going to measure any of the emissions from the ones that are probably up at the northeast because of the distance. You're so far away. Now, if you had your car and your mobile monitoring, look at this road that you could drive all the way down. You could go in, you could park by people's houses, and you could drive all the way around all of these, and you would be able to find out, hey, if I was in this cluster of 3 to the northeast, what's that pollution like versus if I was right smack in the middle of this cluster of 3 directly east of the pushman? You know, you could start to see some variation. And it depends on topography, etc. So next slide, please. So, and I just to beat it in deeply, the Delmarva Land and Litter Report did not include windrows data. Okay. Now, I've been an expert witness and testified about air pollution for many years. If I didn't have windrows data when I testified, they would say I was incompetent and throw my testimony out of court. Okay, it's a basic premise. So for it not to be in the report is disturbing. Okay, maybe they used it, but it was not in the report. And then, like I said, the locations are not in a place where you would detect pollution from the source the majority of the time the wind would be blowing. Okay, next slide.
I'm gonna interrupt you for a second, Gabby. We got some stuff going in the chat. There are folks saying you're conflating 2 studies. So I'm just gonna let you know that. Some industry folks online saying you're conflating 2 studies.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry. Sorry, industry. But I am talking about this one study, and if I'm calling it something wrong, I apologize. I am traveling, I'm in a hotel room. So this is quick. I wanted people to say, a lot of times when you're monitoring air pollution, you can't
Sorry
see
again,
it.
Kathy. I'm
Yeah.
not sure who they are. They said they're not industry. Maybe they're MDE or somebody else, but you're saying you're conflating the
Okay,
stuff. So
fair enough.
whoever they are.
Probably
There you go.
the question and answer they can, and yeah, okay. Anyway, back to most of the air pollution, like particulates, is PM10 and PM2.5, which is a very, very small particle. I'm putting this picture here. This is called like a pink smoke test that you do for poultry barns to check their ventilation rate. And this is a visible particulate size. So I will say something about that here shortly. But this particular study I found on Iowa State University's website called AMPAT, Animal Management Systems for Air Pollution Control, AMPAT. And one of the things they're trying to show here is this black structure next to the poultry barns. Basically, it's a chain link fence with some black mesh attached to it. You can kind of see one corner of it is pulled aside so you can see the structure. It's very, very, it wouldn't last an Oklahoma wind, but it's a very simple structure to show that if you have any kind of barrier right there at the fans, that smoke goes straight up in the air, right? Now that's the visible size. What you can't see are the PM10 and the PM2.5, which are microns that are, smaller than, I don't know, some fraction of the size of your hair in your head. And we can see pollution with pink smoke. Industry knows there's pollution, okay? They know it. But community members get ridiculed about it. So it's really important to be able to show visually, no, this is what we're talking about. Now that there's cameras called FLIR, F-L-I-R, they're a thermographic camera that can measure methane. They take pictures at the infrared spectrum, and they can show, methane gas billowing from, an oil and gas storage tank. There's also methane that's billowing out of, not methane, but, there's CO2, there's ammonia, there's some methane from degradation of proteins. There is technology to show that the gases that are coming out of barns in the infrared spectrum. Okay, they're expensive cameras, they're like $100,000, but they are there, and industry, they're available. I'm just saying. Next slide, please, because I think my time is almost up. Real quickly, I put some math in here. So the first thing I did was the Animal Waste Management Field Handbook is the National Engineering Handbook for Agriculture, the NRCS. And so in Chapter 4, they give you some data, some factors, design factors to calculate how much nitrogen poultry birds poop or generate in their manure. And so I did that calculation with 5 flocks per year and about 1/10 of a pound of nitrogen per bird. Okay, so 108,000 pounds of nitrogen per year. Now, what happens to that? So there's been some emission studies, Sheehan, Burns, and Lee, which is one of the ones I used when I did expert testimony. They measured ammonia coming out of the barns for 180,000. They did a study on poultry barns, not 180,000 head, but they did a study through the NAMES research. Okay, so there was a industry cooperated air emission study, and they came up with some emission factors. So you could multiply the number of birds times this emission factors, and you would get the amount of a pollutant that was emitted out of the exhaust fans. And so in this case, the emission factor is 0.0013 pounds of ammonia per bird per day. And then you times the number of birds, times the number of days, then you've got, and I use 250 days because poultry operations are not, they don't have birds in there every single day, but they do have litter in there every day. And I will tell you this, when they put the baby birds in there, before they put the baby birds in there, they crank up the heat on the barn, you know, they put some curtains down to make a smaller amount of space, but they crank the heat up to 80 degrees, which volatilizes even more ammonia that might be left in any litter. Because if they just took the cake out and left the main litter there, there's still ammonia. So there's periods of time where there's huge amounts of emissions coming out of the barns. For example, the older the birds get, right before they're captured, they're at their peak of generating dust and feed dust and everything because they're basically packed in their cheek to jowl. So there's an increase in particulates that comes at the very end of the flock cycle. And then of course, when they're capturing the barns are open, the birds are all everywhere. There's a lot of dust generated right then. So it's not a consistent amount. There's fluctuations of emissions that come out, but we're just gonna nail it down to a small amount. So I thought, well, what's interesting? Here's the amount of nitrogen you generate. Here's the amount you're losing in emissions. Put it in the same units, which is ammonia as nitrogen. You're losing almost 45% of your nitrogen coming out the barns. Okay, next slide. I'll wrap this thing up, bring it home. I wanted to talk real briefly about vegetative environmental buffers, because that's usually the first thing that industry and the regulatory and the ag universities say, oh, we can plant trees. Okay, and they, this picture I actually took from the report that I'm discussing. And if you see, these are nice little, I don't know, maybe a 2-gallon pot. If you went to Home Depot, they'd probably be about 30 bucks, 40 bucks. I've been to many places where they were smaller. It'll take years for those trees to be even remotely useful in changing the direction of air pollution, et cetera. They're usually planted way too far away from the barns. They're not planted correctly. And then I want to just say that there's been a reliance on some studies that say, oh, they've reduced the pollution. And, you know, when I read the studies, I go, well, when the wind is blowing perpendicular, and that means the pollution is not coming towards your vegetative buffer. So just because you got a lower number doesn't mean you've controlled anything, right? I mean, that's simple, but sometimes you'd be surprised that some of these experiments try to take advantage of people not really thinking about it too carefully. Okay, last slide. I believe. Okay, so in summation, air pollution exists. You can't see it with the human eye, but it's there. I just want you to be confident in that. Stationary monitors can only measure the pollution when it's blowing directly at it. Therefore, mobile monitoring and community and citizen science is the best way. People who are on the ground that know how their environment works, where the wind's blowing, where the barns are, where the people live, they can get up and down the roads and take measurements that make sure we're detecting the pollution we know is there. Running around saying there's no pollution is insulting. Okay, you need to find it. You need to move your body around and find it, because the wind is pushing it all over the community. Okay, thank you very much. And I'll read the comments now in the chat.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathy. That was wonderful. We do have a lot of activity in the chat, so we will have some time to address that in the Q&A session here at the end. So please, folks, if you don't mind being patient, holding those questions for just a little longer. Katie Kurowski is going to be next, giving a presentation on some work we've been doing here on the Eastern Shore. I do want to thank everybody that is a part of the team that's been working on that project, the Johns Hopkins team, Dr. Chris Heaney, Dr. Anna Rule, Katie, Chris Spicer, Maddie, and Deanne, just the whole team. You guys are really amazing. And also Dr. Kirby Wilson, who has, and Dr. Heaney, who have just made huge strides for community science and for communities everywhere in our region and beyond. So thank you guys so much. With that, Katie, I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. And I'm sorry, I'm attempting to share my screen. Okay. You guys see it in presenter see the presentation? Okay. I can't see anyone, so I'm going to assume that's a yes. Okay. I'll be brief because I know we're kind of running a little bit short on time and we would like to get to the community discussion part, but I was just going to spend a little time today talking about our pilot project that's been funded by Charmed to look at the air pollution related to poultry in the Delmarva Peninsula. So our project title is RAMPed, Regional Air Monitoring of Poultry Emissions in Delmarva. Like Mike said, this project is a collaboration between us at Johns Hopkins, as well as Maria and Mike with SESH and SHEN. And apologies. Sorry, my internet is lagging a little bit. There we go. Okay, so some of the goals of this project were to identify or quantify the community air pollution that is attributable to CAFOs, particularly poultry CAFOs, and the related biofuel infrastructures. We also want to work on quantifying the surface contamination, specifically related to poultry, using microbial source tracking markers. And lastly, we want to kind of set this up in a hyperlocal network. We want to be able to have a community-led and community-maintained air monitoring network and be able to disseminate these findings to community members and help support ongoing legal action, policy change initiatives, different community activities. So I'm just going to spend a short amount of time kind of briefly explaining what we did or what we've been doing. And so I'm going to focus more on the air monitoring portion today and not as much on the surface swab collection. So we've been doing a combination of real-time gas concentration monitoring using mobile techniques, as well as stationary particulate matter air monitoring as well. So we have these pictures. I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse, but down here in the bottom, there is a car. It's the back of a car, and we have a Picaro gas concentration analyzer, and the tubing runs out the window, and basically it's sampling air as we drive through different parts of the Eastern Shore, kind of sampling, taking in air and sampling methane, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and carbon dioxide. This is also run off of a pump. You can see the pump here, and there's a battery pack that we have to plug it all into. So this is kind of our car setup and what we do when we do that. This is actually a picture of all of us sampling one of our first times in April when we did some more monitoring. You can see it's a little tight. We have our computer monitor here to look at the pollution as we're driving. We've also set up 5, if you include we have a kind of a control site, modular units, and that's down here. It's basically a particulate matter air monitor that's going to be capturing wind speed, wind direction with this anemometer, as well as PM10, PM2.5, total suspended particles, and a few other gases. So we have these set up with community members who are willing to let us set these up in their yard and kind of capture what's going on with the particulate matter close to CAFOs and other biofuel infrastructure. In addition, not really going to present much on today as well, but we also have trail cameras attached to a few of these modular units to kind of get a sense of, like, when we see a PM10 spike, what are we seeing that could be generating it? So kind of matching that pollution with an image as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk about two quick result slides of what we've been seeing. So this is from a mobile monitoring trip we took in August. And each of the peaks that are in these blue boxes represent ammonia spikes. This was particularly an area that was surrounded by CAFOs. So like when you drive down the road, they're on your right, they're on your left. And there's also I believe an anaerobic digestion facility close by too. And there are community houses along this area as well, right amongst these barns. And so you can see that each of these boxes is a kind of a lap. So we drove around by this facility 3 times, and you can see every time we were in anywhere from 500 to 600 parts per billion of ammonia. And we kind of identified these sites with Mike and Maria. They were the ones who gave us the idea of, like, okay, here's where we have reports of ammonia. Here is where we should be looking based on kind of a community identified ammonia plumes. And there's a map that we were able to pull these from. And that's kind of an example right here. You can see this red box is a community identified plume. And this purple dot kind of represents this general area that we didn't want to go too close, kind of trying to keep it more broad. So after that, we decided, okay, well, why don't we try to set up a stationary version of the mobile air monitoring that we were doing. So we took one of those Picaros and we were able to put it in the home of a community resident for about 2 weeks in December. This resident actually lives near this area where there are a bunch of poultry CAFOs. I was not able to look up exactly how far away his front door was from this CAFO. I didn't have a chance to do that, so I apologize. But the CAFO is directly across the street. You can see the barns from this person's house. So we left the monitor set up for two weeks, and we also have a PM10 monitor there as well. So the kind of notable thing I want to point out is that you can see these like really large spikes of ammonia throughout the 2-week period while the monitor was there. And there's a lot of fluctuation before and some down here as well. But overall, the thing that I think draws your attention most is these 3 peaks. And you can see there's also a lot of fluctuation in PM10. It doesn't necessarily correspond with the ammonia, but we're working on doing some more analyses to kind of see what that might look like. We also decided to partition the data and kind of look at what is the mean over this period of time, mean ammonia and mean PM10 levels downwind from the CAFO as well as non-downwind. So basically we qualified, we kind of looked at the map and decided where is downwind based on the location of the CAFO and the location of the air monitor. And so we have a defined range that is considered downwind, and then everything else was non-downwind. So you can see that the ammonia levels were higher downwind than compared to non-downwind. There really wasn't a difference between the PM10, but again, this is very preliminary. So we're intending to look at this a little bit more and kind of explore more into this difference between why we might not see a difference between downwind and non-downwind. But I think the notable thing to look at for here is the difference between the ammonia and between downwind and non-downwind. That's all I really have today, but I just want to give, like I said, a shout out to Mike and Maria. None of this would be possible without them. They truly are great, and they're the only reason why this project works. And additionally, really wanted to give a shout out to Chris Spicer. I don't believe he's on anymore, but most of this also technically wouldn't be possible without him. He's the person who really has helped me learn how to do this and kind of set everything up. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much for having me speak today.
Thank you so much, Katie. And I think this is like talks to the question, we need more science. We have the technology now. Dr. Heaney, I'm going to bring him on, but you know, we talked about Steve Wing, Dr. Wing, and this was his dream. Dr. Heaney said, like, if we had that equipment then, these were the questions that he was trying to answer. So we are so grateful and appreciative to be part of this team and to be doing this work because it's so necessary. The communities, they need to be a part of the discussion. They need to be a part of the science, and we need everyone to come to the table. That's the only way you fix the problem. So Dr. Heaney, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you again for everything.
Thank you all. Thanks to all the speakers for presenting that very important testimony about the history and where things stand currently with respect to some of the concerns around poultry CAFOs. I think there was a very robust discussion in the chat, so I want to create an opportunity for people to ask questions, seek clarification from the speakers. So let's make sure we start there, and we've got about 30 minutes remaining. Regarding the point about 2 recent air monitoring studies in the region of the Delmarva. Matty Alberg, if you look up in the chat, he tried to provide the links to 2 campaigns. And so I think that is some of the confusion. So I welcome anybody. I believe we might have folks from MDE on as well, if they're able to clarify, you know, what those campaigns were able to achieve. And I think what we all here at Charmed with this forum, what we want to be cognizant of are what are the knowledge gaps that remain, that we need scientific data and information that could help clarify some of the questions of the community residents in ways that could inform navigating processes to further protect and enhance their environment and their health. So I'll pause there and just see if anybody who's involved, particularly in the University of Maryland Eastern Shore and the MDE-led effort, because I think that's a study that we didn't quite have as much discussion on.
I don't know if there's anybody on from MDE. This is Alec Eccles. I'm a consultant to the Campbell Foundation. So there are many things said today that were, I don't think, intentionally misleading. Science is tough. If this was easy, it'd be done, but let me highlight a few things. So, Maria, I think we first met about 4 years ago when we first started thinking about doing an ambient air assessment. And I think, we talked periodically through this, most recently, I think in December of this year. And we have called out repeatedly that the DLLC assessment and the ambient air assessment that's done with a partnership, and that partnership includes MDE is the original designer and operator. University of Maryland Eastern Shore is the principal operator now. Campbell Foundation put in money, and the DLLC was asked to put in money and has. Sites were selected by MDE. It was designed to measure what ambient air quality is, and it looked at 3 particular metrics: ammonia, PM 2.5, and PM 10. All of the data is publicly accessible, has been. I think it's updated not hourly, but the data is collected hourly and it's updated on a very regular basis. There's a public comment period or a public comment access portion at the website. Anyone who's ever contacted us has been responded to. So please go look at the data. The data was not designed to measure the outflow of a CAFO. It was designed to measure what the ambient condition is, what most of the variety of people are exposed to. The original project had 4 sites, one in Baltimore. And I would note that automobiles are a significant source of both particulates and ammonia. One at Horn Point, which for those that are familiar with the geography is on the windward side of the Chesapeake Bay. So it was used as a control, expecting there to be a very low. And then the 2 additional sites, one that is proximate to chicken houses, and there is both a windrows and a distance from chicken houses noted on the website, and one that's more of a does not have as intense of agricultural of chicken houses proximate to it. There is another site that is being deployed now that also is an area of intensive chicken house production or chicken house operation. The Horn Point site has been discontinued because we learned what we needed from the ambient we wanted to benchmark to compare it against. It was MDE that decided to discontinue the Horn Point site. So on gaps of what's needed, this project was designed to measure ambient air. Don't assume that it was done to achieve something else. All the data is available. There are lots of public health questions. That data is made available so people can look at those kinds of issues. We know that there are gaps about what may come out in intense, for example, immediately downwind of an exhaust. That's not what this project was designed to do. And there's been lots of discussion about the DLLC report, a completely different report. If folks need clarification, we can do, but it's really important. The 2 have been conflated. They're not the same. Let's get the science right.
Thank you for that, Alex. So I think with that, now hopefully pretty clear about what that air monitoring campaign could answer and what it couldn't. And I think with our speakers, I think what we're recognizing is a knowledge gap that might address the kinds of plumes, transient plumes, plumes that could be overtaking someone's home, residence, or neighborhood among neighbors at the fence line who live proximal. This is something I think that is, it sounds like still an open question. So I would just say that, and if any of our community guests would speak to that as well, I would welcome it. And I also see Anna Rule has her hand up.
Thank you, Chris. Alex, I have a question for you. I mean, thank you for that clarification. That is a huge difference, right? If you're not trying to measure the emissions from the CAFOs, then we understand why the monitors were there. But can you clarify why that was the rationale, knowing what the community wants or what the community really is concerned about are the emissions from the CAFOs? Why was the main impetus to just measure the ambient air? Could you clarify that, please?
Yeah, so somebody should be measuring that. Campbell is not a government operation. We were interested in and are continue to be interested in what is the ambient condition. There were several suggestions that ammonia was making a very significant load of nitrogen to the Chesapeake Bay and causing pollution of the Chesapeake Bay. That's been a long historic investment of the Campbell Foundation, is recovery of the Chesapeake Bay. And so one of the things that we wanted to understand was more about what the nitrogen loading is to the region. There are other institutions that have expertise in health issues and particularly airborne pollutants that affect.
Sorry, did we lose Alex? Did others? Here we lost Alex, I think. Alex, if you're using a headset, it might have muted itself. You're not shown as muted on the Zoom. Well, thank you. I think while Alex figures out his connection, continue on with our discussion. He was talking about a role for public health, institutions that focus on public health to address different questions from those that were the focus of those air monitoring campaigns.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm not using a headset, but
we can hear you now.
We can hear you now. Yep.
So,
okay.
Alex, I have a question which I put in the chat. Chris, do you mind if I ask? We know that the EPA particulate monitoring is not particularly dense in the region, but are there monitors that are centered on the Eastern Shore? And if so, why wasn't that data used for ambient measurement since it is collected continuously?
Marcia, there are, as part of this study, there are particulate matter monitors at actually those two maps that were shown earlier, the Princess Anne site, the Princess Anne map, and then the Pocomoke City map. Both of those sites have federal equivalent method PM 2.5 and PM 10 monitors running at those sites. And then at our, as Alex said, our Horn Point site, which is in Cambridge, we also have an FEM, so another federal equivalent PM 2.5 analyzer. And then if you keep going north, we have another site up in Kent County that has particulate matter as well. So, you know, some as part of the state's regulatory network, and then some as part of this special study that Alec referred to.
Well, we know that they don't typically measure nitrogen, but I'm just curious why they invested in this study when there is so much data available through the EPA.
There were no ammonia monitors on the shore before this work.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Right. And in the areas that the project sites are located in Somerset County and Dorchester County, or Worcester County, I'm sorry, there wasn't any PM data either. So, both of those, parameters, there just wasn't the data there. We didn't know what we were going to see.
Yeah. I think all of my colleagues, we realize that for some reason, the density of those monitors in this state are not quite the same as it is in other regions for some reason. Not sure why, but.
Gabby, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I think something else that needs to be addressed that hasn't been, as far as air quality is concerned, is that the DLLC white paper literally states within that, and you can watch the webinar from their website, is that ammonia does deposit and it's falling within 3 miles of its origination site, which, by definition should count as an emission because of it falling within the waterways. And if you're familiar with the Eastern Shore, what's really interesting is that there's water everywhere, including tax ditches that were dug back in the 30s and literally hold water and drain water from farm fields. Well, where are CAFOs built, y'all? In around farm country, in and around these rural areas where tax ditches were done to literally drain waterways into tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. And that was something that was addressed by ASTI Coastal Trust a few years ago and lost in the Supreme Court of Maryland because for whatever reason, the Supreme Court, mostly all appointed from Larry Hogan, decided that in fact ammonia was not an emission, but literally and should be regulated with air quality permits. And that is something that, it is adequately identified in the DLLC white paper, and it needs to be addressed because it is not. And we do not have enough regulations as ammonia, as is required by ammonia because of this. And come on, y'all. If it's depositing, people are affected by it. If people are living near CAFOs, they're affected by it. And we need to recognize that.
Yeah. Chris, I know that Katie cut her talk short, but could you or Katie explain the benefit of looking for the infectious agent deposition? This will give more specificity because it can always be argued that these components in the air came from somewhere else. So I think the second or third aim of your study would add a dimension that would be harder to deny the source.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the reason I didn't really include much about it is we haven't had the time yet to quite do the processing and do the testing, but what we're intending to do is look for microbial source tracking markers, which are like bacteria and components of like DNA that are specific to different sources. So like the one that is really common that we probably, I don't know how many people on the call have heard about it, but the one I first heard about was pig two-back, which is a swine specific fecal marker. So when you see pig two-back, you know it's coming from hog poop. So we use this in North Carolina, kind of relating it to hog CAFOs. So the hope is to do something similar in the Eastern Shore and doing it with poultry specific markers. Now we have to still do some testing to kind of figure out which of the poultry markers would be the best representation of that pollution, but that's kind of what we've been working for. And that's what this last aim of our study is. So we collected settled dust from our air monitors that are located in the community and kind of are hoping to test that to see if we can identify these poultry specific fecal markers to kind of indicate that that pollution is coming from a CAFO or a litter pile or something else nearby. And Chris, if you have anything else, Anna, if you want to chime in, if I missed anything, please feel free.
You did great. And one thing I'll add is that we heard about water in addition to air, and the microbial source tracking markers like those Katie described have a long history of being used predominantly, I think, in water to identify sources of impairment, bacterial pollution, which affects the sanitary quality designation and safety of recreational uses of water. So we've applied these to settle dust and hypotheses around fit and transport of air pollutants. So the other area, Marcia and Honorul, I don't know if you want to speak about this, but there's also a history of this in doing measurements for antimicrobial resistant bacteria that can be done strategically while driving, following poultry trucks in a way that the deposition hypotheses are pretty clear, and then you can attribute the presence or absence of these antimicrobial resistant bacteria to the poultry vehicles. So that's a very nice study and the science upon which we're building a lot of this work. Okay, thank you for that. And one question I think that is going to be important is for there to be a good understanding of the results of those two area level Eastern Shore studies, the ambient ammonia concentrations that were observed at exactly like we heard from Alex at an area level, and how can we contrast that with some of the ammonia levels that we might be measuring as we're, as Katie's project mentioned, being asked by community residents, where have they lived with, noticed by their lived experiences, observed substantial malodor, and how can we compare the levels of ammonia and other air pollutants in those contexts? So that's something that I think we are very interested in at Charmed, Alex, as you mentioned, as a public health institution, and I think that's a role around which we can begin to build some scientific and technical capacity. Alex, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say, we have worked really hard to make all of the data available publicly. And Maria and I talked about this in December, and I think it's your intention to make all the data that you collect, the methodology, the specific data, all available publicly as well, because we need this kind of information to understand what's going on. So is that what we'll expect?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize that was directing me. Yes, that is the hope. I have a question actually, Alex, in response to that. Where would we be able to find the publicly available data? Is there like a link to it I just missed? I just was curious if there's like a way to see it.
Oh, it's been in the chat. If you Google Lower Eastern Shore ambient quality.
Perfect. Yeah, I have that link up. Awesome. Thank you.
You can drill down. There's hourly data for each of those three metrics. Now, sometimes the sampler fails, and so it may not be, it might be there 95% of the time, but, as you know, equipment takes maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go to Vantasha.
Yes, hello everyone here. It's Vantasha here. I'm calling actually from Charles County. First of all, thank you for having this great event here. But just wondering, with all the work that you're doing, and I'm just wondering that we are actually at the southern part of the Chesapeake Bay here, and I just wonder what type of monitoring, if any, are we doing across the state? Are we checking the different waterways or anything along those lines to see what's actually might be flowing south of maybe Delaware or across the water for the Eastern Shore, which we are here in the Southern Maryland region as well?
That's a great question. And I think that's an area related to water sampling and measurements that we focus mostly on air, I think. And we also heard about the range of workplace exposures from Emanie. So that is an important area I think we should work moving forward. But if anybody on the call, Anna, I'm thinking Marcia or others has information about prior water quality work on the Eastern Shore, please, by all means, speak up.
We did have, just very quickly, we did have a few students from Johns Hopkins come down here and do a few deliverables a few years in a row, I do believe.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we did discuss a lot of the same issues that you're discussing right now. We are experiencing a lot of the exact same health concerns, asthma, air, contaminants, our waterways, all the same issues that you're discussing. We're having those same issues here in Charles County. So I'll just let you know that we are in the same boat, and we're in this thing together. So
Anna, you might want to mention the potential work that you're doing with the river keepers that are more DC based.
Right. Well, so right now the work that we're doing with the river keepers is a little more focused on the metals coming from the coal ash deposits and some of the PFAS coming from the Department of Defense sites. But they are also interested in looking at the CAFOs that are in that area. It's just right now we're having a manpower issue. We don't have enough capacity, and also, like everybody recognizes here that has done air monitoring, it's not trivial. It's a lot of hours, it's a lot of work to site the monitor in the precise place to capture the precise thing that you're talking about. If it's mobile monitoring, it's a lot of work of driving around and matching the data that you want. So we all recognize these are issues. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention is one of the things that we haven't even scratched, but soon hopefully we can start looking into it, is these are only the exposures, but the health effects are compounded by some of the non-visible or non-physical stressors, right? So living surrounded by these animals and flies, and you can't open your windows, and all of these sort of like go beyond anything that we can measure correctly. I think we should all recognize that we need to also address so that we can respond to the community concerns in a more efficient way. And anyway, that's all that I'm going to say right now.
Thank you, Anna. And there's also been prior work by previous PhD students in our department who've graduated who've done water microbiology work. So we at Charmed can put a task on our to-do list to go back and pull their work, see that prior art. Some of them were advised by folks who we all know quite well and work very closely with. I want to give a chance for Maria and Michael, who are bringing a community question that's in the chat, and we've had a very robust chat. So please, Maria and Michael, if you don't mind reading the community concern.
Sure. So, and this kind of goes to what we've all been talking about, right? Is, you have, these are not, I don't think, non-point sources. They're point sources. The fans are point, right? Emissions come out. It goes to the ground. It goes into the waterways. And whatever is going into the air, look at the way our waterways are being negatively impacted here. I mean, we have no more room to go down, right? So it's like we have to realize the environment, it's all interlinked. The air, the water, one affects the other. But we've had horrible problems in terms of enforcement, getting some of this under control. So a member, again, we've been working with since 2000, I'm going to say 16 or 17. They sent in a question. They really wanted to be here, but they had a prior commitment. He said, one thing I want to raise is the 6+ inches of rain we got in January and how that affects wastewater disposal on and around the CAFOs. I had to call DENREC last week to complain about Clean Delaware spraying human wastewater on frozen ground. They sent the DENREC police to investigate. Artesian has never stopped spraying the Allen Rim wastewater on the wooded section of their spray fields. Rain, frozen ground, and snow doesn't stop them. All of the wastewater that doesn't make it into the frozen ground, it's washed into the stream that eventually flows into Prime Hook. We need to start water sampling the stream below the spray fields. So again, okay, this is what we live, right? I mean, 10 years, 20 years. Why is it the job of community to work full time to be enforcement, to get regulations passed, to do things that you
Oh, Maria, we lost you. You're frozen.
Just this discussion with Justice 40 and where is the 40% going down to, right? Because it's not flowing. We have to have communities that are taking part in every aspect of meaningful participation and decision-making processes and the science. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Maria and Michael. You did break up briefly, but I think we got the point, and that comment from the community resident was very important. One example among the others that we can look at the prior work in microbiology and source tracking markers around the Eastern Shore. I'm just going to chat another study here that we did in North Carolina that was community driven and dug into these questions of the potential for the waste lagoon spray fields of the swine CAFOs to affect downstream versus upstream water quality. So that's something I think is a big issue that we're hearing, in addition to many of the presenters speaking about poultry industry worker concerns with health and exposure, and the neighbors' concerns with air emissions. I'll pause. We have a couple minutes, maybe just to see if there are any other questions, but I'd really like to also thank again all of our speakers for taking the time to bring these issues forward to Charmed, to the Environmental Justice Partners, Partnerships Board, stakeholder community, and also ask you to please be on the lookout for messages from us as we try to organize an in-person part 2, where we follow up. We can follow on many of the questions and track down a lot of information, as Charmed is here to help collate and combine and try to bring in support, scientific and technical capacity around community issues. And so we will do that, but we want to do that on the pathway towards a part 2, where we're invited down and we can be there, see it in person, possibly take a tour. Possibly we were talking about whether we could do some invitations for a mobile monitoring ride along so that people could see it, experience it, smell it, and then also see the data in real time. So those are some of the ideas that we're trying to explore for part 2 this spring, hopefully when it's a little bit warmer and we can visit with the communities. I will hold the floor for anybody who would like to make any final comments. Okay, Maria and Michael, thank you for being our hosts. Thank you for coordinating all of the speakers, Gabby, Emanie, Katera, Kathy, everyone. Thank you so much for your valuable contributions. And thanks everyone for the participation and all of the wonderful discussions in the chat. That's what we need. We need to be engaged. We need to talk about knowledge gaps and try to fill them in order to have the opportunity to inform protective actions moving forward. So I thank you again for everything.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Have a good evening all.
Everybody.
Thank you, Maddie. Take care.